So what vegetable seeds can we sow in November? Well, surprisingly, there's quite a few. And as we notice, the air temperatures start to drop fairly significantly through November and eventually into December. And the days are getting shorter, which means we've got less light. It does suggest there's less opportunity to plant vegetables. And compared to the main growing season, that's actually correct. But there's still quite a lot of things that you can put in the ground outside and inside a polyhouse or a greenhouse in order to give you an autumn and winter harvest or an early spring harvest. So in this video I'm going to give you a few suggestions for seeds that you might think about growing in November. And if you do like the video, don't forget to give it the thumbs up, and if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit and veg and a few recipe ideas, then don't forget to press the subscribe button. So the first thing you might think about planting right at the beginning of November is garlic. Now garlic can be planted anytime really from mid-October through to maybe the first few weeks of November because it does demand cold temperatures. So garlic will prefer temperatures of between 1 degree and 10 degrees centigrade, that's soil temperature, and it needs that in order to split into the cloves. This is a variety called Allotment White, which I've got a bag here of bulbs that I picked up from a local market trader. And I bought it in 2 batches, so in total I've paid around about £3 for about 8 or 9 bulbs, and if you compare that price to some of the seed merchants, you will pay a lot more than that. And all we'll do to plant the garlic is split it into the cloves, just like you would if you were going to use it for cooking. And then when you get a clove, you'll plant it so that the flat end, which is called the basal plate, is the bit that goes into the ground. And normally garlic, you'll plant that around about twice the depth of the actual height of the clove. So they go a little bit deeper than onion sets, and they're pushed firmly into the ground, spacing them at probably 5 to 6 inches apart. And ideally you want to plant these in well draining and fertile soil. And the reason for that is you don't want any potential for waterlogging, because otherwise the bulbs could end up rotting. The variety that I'm using here is a variety called Allotment White, which is a really popular variety in the UK. It's a soft neck variety, and if you know anything about garlic, you'll know that there's soft neck and hard neck varieties. From a growing perspective, there's not a huge amount of difference. People say that hard neck garlic is slightly more flavoursome than soft neck, but soft neck stores better, it'll last longer. But really, from a growing perspective, there isn't really much difference. This variety is a soft neck variety. So the first thing that you can grow in November is garlic. Another good thing to plant in early November is onion sets. And when you're planting onion sets, all you need to do is prepare the ground, just give it a good rake over to make it as fine as you possibly can. What I've done as well this year, I've just put a very light sprinkle of fish blood and bone, just to give extra nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, which is what fish blood and bone provides. Just very light. So I've raked it in, watered it in, and then I'm just going to push the onion sets just below the surface into the ground. So once you've prepared the ground, put the onion sets on top of it and literally just gently just push them in. And all you need to do is I just need to see the surface of the top of them just disappearing slightly, and then leave them, and then just water them as you need, and then you'll have a good crop in spring or early summer. Now last week I planted 7 rows of a variety called Senchui, which are a Japanese white onion, but I'm also going to plant some of these. This is a variety called Red Baron. And the beauty of onion sets, particularly planting them at this time of year, there's a significant reduction in the ability for them to bolt because of the cooler temperatures, and they're perfectly fine in the ground over the frost and the cold weather. So they're a good thing to put in now. They'll establish themselves over the next week or two, because even in November the soil temperature is not freezing just yet. It gets cooler as it goes in through November and December, so they will establish, and then that will give you a good early harvest of onions. Obviously different to onion seeds, they will probably I'll probably start planting them in pods in the polyhouse in February or March, just to give them a start. But it's good to have a good supply of onions, and now in November is a good time to plant them. Next we have broad beans. Now I love broad beans, and over recent years you'll know from previous videos on my channel that I've grown a variety called Bunyard Exhibition, which is this variety here. And they're absolutely fabulous. They're a really good variety of broad beans, and it's okay to put them in. In fact, it's good to put them in November now. But this year I've actually I'm going to try a different variety. This is a variety I've just got, which is called Valenciana. I've read about them and they seem to be a really good variety of broad beans. I just want to try something different really. But if you are going to plant broad beans, you've got to make sure that they are an overwintering variety. A very popular one in the UK is something called Aquadulce Claudia, which you could try them, they'd be absolutely fine. But I'm going to try these Valenciana this year. In November. What will happen is that they will grow to a certain height, maybe 2 to 3 inches, and then they'll appear to be very, very slow and dormant over the December period through to February. But obviously when it gets to spring, or when the weather starts to warm up in March or April, they'll suddenly start to accelerate, and you've got a really good opportunity then for these to get an early crop for you. And the beauty as well about having an early crop is that you'll miss the worst of the black fly. I've grown broad beans every single year as an allotment holder, and I've never once avoided black fly. It's something that is just part and parcel of growing broad beans. But I do find that the early varieties, like planting now in autumn, it does avoid the worst of it. So broad beans are a really good crop for you to plant now in November. Now this might surprise you, but in November it's also possible to plant first early peas. You've got to get the right variety of peas. It's got to be a variety that can be planted at this time of year, because not all varieties can. But I've got a variety here, again very popular variety in the UK, called Calvert & Wonder. And I'll be planting these in pods in my poly house, letting them overwinter and then transplanting them. But you can actually plant these outside as long as you are prepared to give them a level of protection over the harshest of the frosts and the cold weather. So peas are something that you can plant. Another variety that's popular in the UK as well is called Meteor. You might try those. They're another overwintering variety of peas. And what you can do, if you grow them in a greenhouse or a poly house, or a polytunnel, whichever one you've got, what you can do as they're growing, you can actually take the growing tips out and use them in salads and stir fries, and that will then allow a really good transplanting crop over winter period. And what about cauliflowers? This is a variety called all the year round cauliflower, and again another very popular variety, and as it suggests, it can be planted pretty much all year round. I planted some in September into pods and then transplanted them inside my poly house. But it does say on the packet that these can be planted outside right up until October. And in November, as long as the soil temperature is not too cold, and remember we are talking about soil temperature here, not air temperature, then it's still possible to plant these outside. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to plant mine inside because I've got quite a large capacity inside my poly house, and then transplant them. But cauliflowers are another thing that you might think about planting in November. Now I love fresh herbs, and on the allotment I've got rosemary, sage, I've got mint, I've got chives, lemon balm, and November's a really good time to actually start off your herbs. You need to do them in pots and take them indoors, maybe on a kitchen windowsill where they're a bit warm, and then obviously when the weather gets warm you can think about maybe moving them or transplanting them. But I've got 4 different herbs that I'm going to be planting in November in pots. The first one, which I've never grown before, and I've just got a packet of it, is dill. There's no variety on there, that's just called dill. But again, that's the type of herb that, again, quite versatile, and you know, can be used for a whole range of different recipes. Next thing, which is always really useful, is parsley. I'm going to be planting that again in pots and putting that on the windowsill. That's a variety called plain leaved 2. This one I really like the look of. This is basil. This variety is called basket of basils. Now I've never grown that before, but it's a mixture of 7 different types of basil. I suppose it's a bit like when you buy the mixed leaves lettuce or greens and you get a variety of them in there. That's the same with basil, so I'm really looking forward to growing that and seeing what that looks like and what it tastes like. And the final herb that I'm going to be planting in November is coriander. Again, I'm going to be putting all of these in pots and putting them in the kitchen on the windowsill, just to make sure that they're kept to a reasonable temperature, and then depending upon when the temperature starts to increase, then I'll start to look at whether I want to move them. That's not to say they might not grow to a size where I can start to take bits of them to use in the cooking, but we'll see how they grow. So herbs, definitely you can grow. There will be others as well, but these are the 4 that I'm going to be growing in November myself, because I have got other herbs already on the allotment I don't need to grow, because some of them are perennials. So for example, like rosemary, it will keep growing and growing and doesn't mind the frost. I've often found as well, I've got sage as well, which it does appear to be affected by the bad weather, because it does go brown and appear to, a lot of it will die off, but even that seems to recover every single year. So I'd say that's a perennial, but you know, it does look like it's not surviving very well, but it comes back strong every year. So I've already got herbs on the allotment, but I'm just going to plant these new ones in November inside. Now, if you watch any video really on any channel that talks about what to plant and when, it's very few that won't mention radish. This is a variety called Scarlet Globe. The packet's a bit water damaged, but the seeds are perfectly fine inside. And the beauty of radish is that you can have a harvest between 4 to 6 weeks after planting them. So even in November, when the temperature starts to drop, you can plant radish and you'll get a crop, you know, very, very shortly afterwards. To be on the safe side, you can plant them inside in pots because they're not really that deep a root vegetable. Or you can try and plant them outside, and as long as the temperature doesn't drop too much, then that'll be perfectly fine. Something else that's good to plant in November is your winter greens. Now here in the trays you can see on the right hand side spinach, which was planted in September, which is a variety called Japanese choy, and you can still plant that in November. To the left hand side you have Mizuna, which is a variety called Wado, and that is like a mustard leaf, which is excellent in salads and stir fries. And I'm going to be planting another sowing that in November. Also as well, you can plant pak choy. Now here you can see the pak choy that's already been transplanted, and these from the seeds that are planted in September. This is a variety called Ushio F1, and that will grow nicely now over the autumn and winter period, but I am going to put another sowing of that in November, because as this is used up I can replace it with later sowings. So your winter greens are also varieties that you can plant of spinach, Mizuna and pak choy in November. And following on from winter greens, it's always good to have a good supply of onions over the autumn and winter period, and therefore you can plant spring onions in November. I'll be planting mine inside the poly house. Two varieties, one variety called Ramrod, which if you've looked at my channel before you know that I've spoken about this variety. Really good spring, and if you've never tried Ramrod spring onions, then give them a try, they're superb. And also a new variety which I've never grown before, one called Elodie, which I'm going to be trying and planting in November. And of course it is really good over the winter period, or the autumn and winter period, to be able to go and to your allotment, to your garden, and actually use, you know, winter greens, radishes, and spring onions are another one of those things that are always really useful to grow. So spring onions are another thing that you can plant in November. Of course, for the purposes of this video, it's worth mentioning that the sowing and growing times may vary depending upon your climate, basically where you are in the world. For the purpose of this video, I'm in zone 8A in the UK, so check out your growing zone and check the backs of your packet just to confirm when you can plant your vegetables. Well, I hope that's given you one or two ideas about what you can grow in November, and hopefully made you realise that the growing season can extend beyond the traditional September harvest. It can go on all through the autumn and the winter. As you've seen from the video, some of the varieties need to be specific varieties for the autumn and winter period, and some of them will be inside, some of them will be outside, but there's a good variety there that you might think of trying yourselves. If you're growing things that I've not covered in the video, or you've got maybe some suggestions for other varieties that you've had success with, or maybe not, over the past, then so just pop them in the comments below so others can see what you're doing. And if you do like the video, don't forget to give it the thumbs up, and if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit and veg, and one or two recipe ideas, then don't forget to press the subscribe button. And I'll see you all on the next video.